right, we are back for a Sunday edition of Seminole Sidelines. And Mark, it seems like you and I have lived on this channel the last 2 days. This is the third time we've done a Seminole Sidelines since 8:30 yesterday morning. But anyway, my name is Pat Burnham. I'm a football analyst for the Osceola, and I am joined by Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts, Osceola managing editor Bob Ferrante, and Osceola football analyst and former FSU offensive lineman Mark Salva. All right, guys, we're going to get to it quick. Florida State comes into the home opener and blows out Southern Miss 66-13. Took care of business, kind of like we thought they would, probably even more impressively, at least from a score standpoint, than we thought they would. Mark and I got to kind of offer our opinions last night. So, Bob and Jerry, we'll start with y'all. Kind of what were your overall impressions of the game last night? And Bob, I'll let you go first since you're taking over producer duties too.
Yeah, I think when you pay $1.5 million to Southern Miss, you get the opportunity to open up the bench. And Pat, we were talking before we recorded, 95 guys getting some significant playing time, a few more on special teams. So this is what you should get from a game like this. You should get a dominating performance by the first teamers, even though it wasn't always pretty. But I think we'll get into a little bit of the development of all these guys. I think that's what keeps them engaged through practices. It keeps them engaged in film study. You've got a chance to look at your own plays and to learn and to grow. And then there's just a ton of positives. I mean, you keep Southern Miss out of the end zone until the third quarter. To me, that's a pretty good defensive performance as a whole too.
Jerry, what about you? What were your thoughts from, I'm assuming you were in the Champions Club, as always, from the end zone?
Yep, watching it from the end zone. Good. I thought it was good offense and good defense. I think our biggest issue for Mike was how was he going to keep it from being any more embarrassing than it was for his former assistant coach and teammate. And I thought he did a good job of managing that. One of the things I was impressed with was in the first quarter, he got some of those young guys in before the game was decided. We got to see guys like Williamson and Spann really make some significant plays. And so I feel he's not a young guy, but he was still very much in the mix early. And so I thought it was excellent game. Now, did we play well? No, I didn't think we played well. And I'm curious to hear Mark's take on offensive line.
Yeah.
And I thought, when you're sitting in where I was sitting, you get a chance to see that offensive line play in the all-22 view. And also some of the receivers were coming open. And while Jordan got burned on with a lot of drops, he also missed receivers. And I think he missed some progressions where he looked to me like he was trying to force the ball downfield, and he had receivers underneath wide open. Yeah. So those were, being positive and critical, that would be it.
All right, Mark, now you and I sat there and said we can't be too nitpicky about this game last night on First Impressions. But to Jerry's point, you go back and look at it, and Jordan probably was not as sharp as we would like to have seen him be. Obviously, drops were an issue. Several guys, as Jerry mentioned out before we got going. But to answer Jerry's question, what were your thoughts after your second watch?
Yeah, so I've gotten through the first half in pretty detailed. And, first let me preface it with this. Look, it was a short week after an emotional win on the road, essentially. In the emotional part, probably played more to it than anything. I mean, to be sharp mentally and be on your best, after going to Orlando and all the pomp and circumstance surrounding that game, and then to get the result we got. I mean, I imagine those guys probably didn't sleep that night. I know I didn't, and I didn't even play, right? And so, right from the get-go, they're behind the eight ball in terms of their preparation, taking the focus off of LSU, trying to focus on Southern Miss, and coaches too, So I think that played a role. And then playing that late at night, I mean, let me tell you, sitting around all day waiting for a game to come around, that gets exhausting too. Quick story. when I got married, one thing I said is we were going to get married at 11:30 a.m. because I didn't want to sit around all day waiting for the wedding because of my experience sitting in Thomasville waiting for a 7:30 game, right? So that gets exhausting. So, I'll give them a little bit of a pass as far as that goes. At the same time, I don't think that we helped our cause offensively anyways. I don't think we helped our cause by trying to force Jordan to throw it down the field. I think Mike, I'm guessing here, it looks to me like he was wanting to hit some big chunk plays and show off Jordan's downfield passing, especially on first down. And because most of those drops, most of those long throws were on first down. So now we're immediately behind the chain, 2nd and 10. And, the play calls that followed up after that weren't great. And so, that starts piling up on each other. Now you're on 3rd down. We don't get it. Drop pass, whatever the case may be. And now we're going for it on 4th down. And so that rhythm just kind of played into the feeling that, wow, we're really not playing great. And look, Jordan was off. He was, he underthrew. He underthrew a few balls, some of those long balls, like where Keon came back to get it and almost made that great throw. That was a little underthrown. One of Johnny Wilson's passes was the one that he caught in his stomach and landed and dropped. That was a little underthrown. If he lays it out there, he could probably catch it. He overthrew Jaheim Bell in the second quarter going the other way, So, he was just a little bit off. Even that one where Johnny kind of had to come around and catch it, he had it in his hands and didn't catch it. That was a tough ball. The one to Hakeem Williams in the end zone.
That should have been a catch.
Yeah, well, it could have been a catch, but it was a little underthrown. So it just wasn't exact. It wasn't what we've seen the last little bit, right? And then, and I'll tell you something else I saw too is, in some of the runs that we had, we ran into some bad looks. I know on one counter we ran into an overloaded side. That wasn't, could he have checked out of that and ran it the other way? I would like to think he could have, but he didn't. And there was a couple of run looks into some runs into some bad looks. So it just wasn't a great game for him overall. I don't think. And it wasn't helped with the play calling early. When we finally got into a little rhythm, we started to get away from some of the trying to get the big chunks on first down. Got a little more productive on first down. And, things started rolling. Look, Southern Miss didn't help their cause any. They had a lot of penalties, offside, stuff like that helped us.
That's a generous statement.
Right. Well, so it's just all that stuff together just made for a herky-jerky offensive game with our first team. And, by the time the young guys got in there, they had given up, and it was just, let's see how many we can get. So I can't believe we're talking about this, and we won by 50, whatever we won by.
Yeah, we said the same thing last night, right? Well, listen, I got a philosophy on the throw it downfield thing. I think Mike has joined my calls, and he is pro 1,000-yard receiver this season. So I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And then you want to know what exhausting is? Waiting for 12:30 for that damn game to end.
Right.
A game that was over 10 minutes, 5 minutes into the third quarter. Now that was exhausting. But you're right. We said last night we don't want to get too nitpicky. But now listen, one of the other questions I had, that they did run for 300 yards. So it's hard to complain about seeing too much inside zone. But what happened to the counter, Mark? Why did we saw a ton of counter against LSU in the second half, and I'm sure some of it is all based off what they saw from Southern Miss. But is there any other reason they would have gone away from the counter? I counted 3 in the first half.
Look, you run the zone. The zone's easy because of the assignment football part of it is there is no assignment, right? You have an area, you facilitate double teams based on how guys align. They shift and stemmed a lot and they slanted a lot, so that might have had something to do with it. It might have been that on a short week, they just wanted to keep it simple. And we ran a lot more outside zone than inside zone. And you know what? We're not the best zone running team. I put in my comments, if you look on the second watch thread, that that when I was a zone guy when I coached, and if it's not the main thing you do, it's hard because there's a lot that goes into it. and there's a lot of little bitty coaching points that you got to have in terms of the back landmarks, lineman landmarks, and feel, and all these things that you got to do. If it's not your main thing, it's hard to be good at it, And it's not our main thing. Our main thing is the counter. Our main thing is the jet sweep and things like that. And outside zone is more of our deal. Inside zone is not a big deal for us, and it's probably a third or fourth down the line for us. And so because of that, we're not as nuanced in how we execute that play like teams that major in it are, right? So that had a little something to do with it too, I'm sure. So you can't do everything, right? And you got to be good at something. And we're good at the counter. Why we did it, I imagine because of the short week, because of the stemming and the slanting that they like to do. That probably played into it.
Mark, if you're going to want to play young linemen in that game, if that was your goal to get the young linemen in the game, would you choose to run the zone, or would you choose to run counter at practice?
I would choose to do whatever we practice the most,
right.
Whatever it is.
What would you practice the most for a young line? Well,
that's my point. I mean, when I say practice, I mean from spring on. What do you major in? What is your identity? If when I came to FSU, we were toss, sweep, and sprint draw, and you learned that from day one. And by the time you were senior, you knew every little thing about those two plays. And I think for us, it's the counter, right? And zone is a secondary kind of thing for us. So I would do whatever we're best at, whatever we spend the most time on.
So I find it odd that we would have run it in that game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question for Alex Atkins.
Yeah.
What is the thought behind that, really? I'd like to know, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about this. We've talked about the fact that Johnny Wilson has struggled to consistently catch the ball. He makes the great catch, does not make the easier catches. Now, I agree with Mark that one catch that he had where he was running towards the bench route towards our sideline, or actually it was a little post route or corner route. He did have a guy in his way, so I had him for 3 drops instead of 4. But with the emergence of a Darian Williamson and a Winston Wright, is he affecting his potential role in this offense as far as snap counts, targets?
If you're asking me, I say yes. I mean, if this becomes the thing, the worst one was the slant. I think it was on a third down in the first quarter, where he just kind of went to the ground for no reason. He was wide open. We ran a clear out, and he slanted underneath it. There's nobody within 10 yards of him, and he kind of goes to the ground and tries to catch it. And there's no reason for him to go to the ground there. And I always remember John Eason talking about, keeping your feet, not jumping to catch the ball when we don't have to jump, keeping your feet on the ground. Because and look, it hasn't been a problem. He did it in LSU. LSU, he come around, he catch the ball, he's on his feet, he can make a move. It takes 10 guys to tackle the guy. He's so big, So I don't know what that's about. I just don't. Again, hopefully it's more of a one-off. I mean, we know he's going to drop a couple, but to have the drops he's like he had the other night, I'm going to chalk it up, as a one-off for now. And put him back out there because we need him. We need him to be the guy that we know he can be. And I'm not giving up on him. And I'm sure the coaching staff is not either. Neither are his teammates. And he'll come through it. And he'll be the productive guy we know he can be. So yeah. But if now moving forward, if it starts becoming more of an issue, then I think it's time to. What's the next guy up? You hate to say that, but that's this is a meritocracy here. The best player plays, and it's the bottom line.
Yeah, nobody's saying we even said in our second watch that we anticipated making more plays, but when Darian Williamson called a very similar route, low thrown ball with no problem about a play later or series later after Johnny's drop, and we've talked about the fact that Florida State does have depth at receiver that it did not have last year. So I think it's a legitimate talking point when you see a guy that could drop four passes in a ball game. But anyway, listen, I know you and I talked about it last night. The offensive line was out without Maurice Smith, still ran for over 300 yards. And I know you were impressed with what you saw with Darius Washington in that game, and a guy who's played every position on the offensive line. So what were your thoughts about how he did and how the whole unit did?
Yeah, I think they did fine. Again, we ran some things that weren't necessarily our strengths. But, look, I'm a big Darius Washington fan. I like to call him a putty man. If you got a hole, you can fill it with him, right? I mean, that's him. So I thought he did a real fine job. Did some really good on some blitz pickups. I think the interior guys did really good. Emmanuel and Roddick were solid. Byers is about, I don't think Byers had his best game. He was about 50-50 on a couple of the outside zones. The one time when we tried to set up a screen and his guy blew right by him, that was just really poor technique. He's rough around the edges, and he's got a lot of work to do to realize the potential that we know he has. And, he's just got to keep working. I'm not down on the guy or anything. I'm just telling you, he's not ready made. Like I think some people seem to think, oh, we're getting this guy. And he's an animal, and he is. He's huge. He's big. He's got a great toolbox. But he's not a refined product by any stretch. And so he's got to continue to work to get better. And he will be a great player, but he's not right now. I think Bless Harris is a really good player. I like Bless Harris. He's athletic. He's got pretty sound technique. I won't say he's the most physical guy, but the position we have him at left tackle, we don't need him to be. He can get to the edge. He can block the edge. He's really good on pass protection. So yeah, he did. I think that they did fine. They did solid for what the problems that they were presented to them.
Mark, let me go back to a question real quick. Do you think the fact that Smith wasn't available to him last night, knowing they were going to hold him out, would that have affected their zone decision to go zone rather than their bread and butter?
Again, look, it's my understanding that Coach Atkins cross-trains these guys from the very get-go, that to the point where we had no idea who was going to start where, when, or how until the first game, right? So I would like to think that that didn't really affect what plays we're going to run, how we're going to run them, or anything like that. It does affect timing and fits, and it affects communication on some level. It's just because it's a different guy, and so, but he had 2-3 days to practice there with those guys, I assume, and I know he's cross-trained there, so it shouldn't have been a huge noticeable thing, especially against Southern Miss. So again, those are good questions for Alex Atkins. What is the thinking behind? How did it affect them? I don't think it should affect or did affect them very much. And why did we run so much zone? That's a good question for them about what their thought was, why they run it. Because I'm not clear in my head why they run it. What is it to them? What is that play to them? What do they think of it? So that's a philosophical question.
Yeah, listen, I'm looking at my notes as you guys are talking, and I have drop circled last night. If Deuce Spann catches his ball in the end zone and Hakeem catches his, we're talking about 80.9. All right, so with that said, let's move to the defense. All right, so listen, I thought the defense, and we're talking more first half defense than we are second half defense, because we're going to talk more about the second half, but defense played extremely well outside of 2 blown coverages in the first.
Well, hey, let's pick up here. Defense played really, really well, and I think let's make this point as Pat's going to try and jump in. Took Frank Gore Jr. out of this ball game, not just because the score got out of hand, but Frank Gore Jr. couldn't run. How did Florida State make Southern Miss early on, Mark, maybe more one-dimensional in this ball game?
Well, they couldn't block us up front is the bottom line. They went out when they threw the ball, they try to go max protect or 6 or 7 man protections. And especially in the interior, they really couldn't block us. The only time that Gore had a good run, there was a stretch of plays there in the second quarter when Omar Graham was in the game. They ran a counter, and he totally whiffed on a tackle. They ran a zone, and Farmer he got through the line, but Farmer came off the double team and made the play. And Farmer did his job. He took up 2 blocks, and Omar kind of got displaced a little too much, created a seam, and then on the counter he totally missed the tackle when everybody had their fit. So that was probably the only thing that I saw that was of any whatever for the defense. Other than that, coverage is really good, and they couldn't block us. I mean, Wiley only had 2 seconds to throw the ball at the most, and so we were in their face pressing them. We had a lot of man, to cover 2 man or straight man on a blitz. And one other thing that did pop up, and it's popped up 2 games now, is the wheel route, right? Wide open, the tight end wide open down the sideline. They shifted, they went to trips, they shifted to a trips, secondary rotates, a lot of hand signals, and 2 guys cover number 2, and number 3 tight end runs a wheel route, wide open. We're on a blitz, short throw. We got lucky. That should have been a touchdown. The other one was they shifted to quads. So they lined up with a tight end on one side, 3 receivers on the other. They shift the tight end over into quads. Secondary did a great job. Everybody rotated. Cornerbacks off into a half safety. Safety comes down. So Akeem, the one where Akeem pulled his hamstring, right? He's down over the top of number 3, and I think it was Greedy over number 2. Well, number 2 goes off. Number 2 goes off into the flat, and number 3 runs the wheel, and they're both covering number 2. And I think Greedy was the one that was supposed to, I'm sorry, number 2 ran the wheel. Greedy was the one that should have came off on the wheel, and he didn't. And they went for a big play, and that got them their field goal, right? So that happened in the LSU game. That was the first play, right? 3rd guy out, half roll, 3rd guy out on a wheel. Kalen DeLoach is caught flat-footed with the eye candy. Boom, big play. Happened twice in this game. That's something that that needs to get corrected, because that has reared its ugly head in the past, right? We've gotten burned on a couple of these wheel routes where there's miscommunication in the secondary, who's got who on some of these shifts. And every time it was a shift. In LSU, they shifted, they motioned, right? They motioned and caught Kalen flat-footed. They shifted to quads, lost number 2, motioned to trips, lost the wheel on that one. So that's something that I think obviously they're going to have to work through and get better on. And but other than that, that was it. It was we're going to play press. We only have to cover for 2 seconds or less. Defensive line's in there. Boom, game over. They didn't have a chance.
Hey, let's continue the defensive conversation here. Some technical issues with Pat Burnham, so we'll just kind of whip it around with some discussion here. Jerry, you have a good vantage point to look at the defense, to watch the linebackers. We saw a lot of young guys, and as Mark's talking about, yes, the wheel route's going to be a challenge for a lot of these younger guys. We're trying to figure it out. But just overall, Blake Nicholson had 5 tackles. I did see him cover a wheel route where he almost had a pick there on the sideline. His feet were trying to stay in bounds as he was falling out of bounds. But Jerry, just overall linebacker play.
I saw us flow to the ball really well. I thought I had a guy sitting behind me that watches a lot of football, and he was impressed with the difference in speed, Lundy year to year. He made that comment, and I mean he was coming off like a rocket on some plays, and I think some of that is weight loss, but I think the other thing, Mark, I've said it before in this program, is familiarity with the defense. He's not reading as long, Yeah. His first step is like Marvin's first step. I don't want to compare him to Marvin, but it's like there's no false step now, and he's coming at it quicker. But on that one with Nicholson, I happened to be watching Nicholson on that play, and he was beat initially. The kid got behind him, but it showed Nicholson's speed to recover and put himself in position on that play. But
it's funny. I was watching him too. It looked to me, he recognized it right away. I mean, he saw the back out in the flat, but when he saw the orientation of the back start to shift, he immediately changed his angle and got in position. And that to me speaks about high IQ, right? He's got a high football IQ, that kid. So almost made a great play. I wish he would have been in bounds, right? But that was nice.
Yeah, he you can see him flying to the ball. And I thought too, we got a lot of, hats around the football. There was a lot of guys at the point of contact last night, which we didn't see in years past. We're getting a lot of people there to the ball.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't block us. Yeah. And that was that. It was academic after that, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, let's think about some other younger guys. A lot of young defensive backs got in the game. Quindarius Jones, Ash Barker, Edwin Joseph. We saw Jerry
Hussey
Jones
with a nice play, right?
Conrad Hussey.
Hussey played early. He was in there in the first quarter. I mean, even before Dent got hurt, I saw Hussey in there.
Yeah.
And this could be a storyline, guys, too. I mean, we don't know the status of Akeem Dent. Is that a short-term hamstring? Hamstrings are the worst thing. You got to give him rest, right? So if he needs rest, and he might, guys, who might be the next young safety who kind of steps in there? We've seen a lot of Kevin Knowles, seen a lot of Shaheem Brown. Who are some other younger guys who we think are ready to go?
Personally, I think it's those three, the ones we just named. Hussey, Shaheem, and
Edwin Joseph,
I saw 27 in a lot.
The converted corner.
Kevin Knowles.
Kevin Knowles.
Yeah.
I mean, those are your three primary guys, and then to Mark's point, go ahead. You're on it.
I was just going to say I saw Ash Barker in there a lot, and he seemed to do pretty. He seemed to do pretty well. I mean, he was in there early too.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys have seen in practice.
We've seen good.
Yeah. So apparently he must be getting some meaningful rest because he was in there before the game was still when the game was still in question, right?
Yeah.
So in some important snaps. So that I was surprised to see that myself because I'm like, who's 27? Why is he in there now? And so that's good, right? That's good, getting meaningful reps.
Yeah.
And so a lot of talent back there, but a lot of young talent. And the more we can get in this situation in games where, they can get some meaningful snaps when the game is still in question, but yet we're not really all that worried possibly. So that's only going to make us better down the line when we're really going to need those guys when we get later in our schedule and games get more important for sure.
Oh, we need them in 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, that game too.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that's certainly a question.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've hit almost 30 minutes on this game. You guys talked again late Saturday night on the game on first impressions. As you probably know, Florida State ranked third in the AP poll, the coaches poll. Benefiting from Alabama's defeat to Texas in part. Hey, it's week 2. We can all kind of choose to take it for what it's worth. It's where things stand right now. Is Florida State playing up to this level, this top 5 level? Are we just too early to make big takeaways from a lot of teams? What thoughts do you guys have about where we are in this whole kind of ranking structure right now?
Well, I think if you just look at the body of work to this point, I think the 2 most impressive wins obviously are us and Texas. I think Texas going to Tuscaloosa and winning the game in the nature of the way they won it, right, puts them in the discussion also. Our win against LSU was a big win. I don't care what anybody says, and I'm going to be honest. I think Miami's win, they looked a lot better. They looked physical. They looked fast. They looked decisive. They made Texas A&M look silly, in my opinion. And so if you just go by body of work and then you throw in, okay, who's got a quarterback that can win this thing, right? I think that's a critical one too. And so I'll take our quarterback. I'll put him up against anybody. I think Texas, obviously, Quinn Ewers looked fantastic. Georgia's quarterback is still a question mark. Alabama's question is definitely a question mark. LSU's got a quarterback, but he didn't play particularly well against us.
Miami's got a quarterback.
Miami's got a quarterback. So you look at teams that, and USC has a quarterback. Washington has a quarterback. So you look at the teams that have good quarterbacks that are playing good ball right now. You look at the teams that have body of work and who has the 2 best wins. I think it's us and Texas. So I think we're right where we need to be. And I think Georgia is until somebody dethrones Georgia based on the roster that they have and the experience that they have. I think we're us being 3 based on all of that. I think we're pretty much where we need to be.
Another team that's got a quarterback is Notre Dame. And that's
Notre Dame. Yes.
Why I picked them high.
Yes. And North Carolina has a quarterback, right? Duke has a quarterback. So yeah, there's some good quarterbacks that we're going to see or that are in proximity to us in the rankings. And to me, those are the teams. I think teams that don't have a quarterback, I don't think they have a chance.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Do we feel slightly different about the ACC based on some of this non-conference success? The Miami beating Texas A&M. I know Wake beating Vandy, you don't take a whole lot out of that, but North Carolina beat South Carolina, Florida State beat LSU. The ACC wasn't maybe expected.
Miami beat A&M, right?
This conference wasn't expected to be great, let's say top through middle. We knew there was going to be a weak bottom, and that's the way it is for a lot of conferences. Do we feel slightly better about that middle tier of the ACC? And Florida State's going to play Duke. Florida State's going to play a lot of these teams in that kind of middle part of the schedule.
I mean, I do. It's funny how all of a sudden NIL is a thing and everything seems to level out a little bit, right? I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know. Is there a relationship there? I don't know. But to your point, Bob, our conference has accounted for itself really well early on, and against SEC teams that everybody's like, well, you get the SEC bump, right? They're an SEC team. They're naturally fast. They're big. They're physical. Blah 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 blah. Well, they pour the most resources into their programs, and that's why. But now you get North Carolina beating South Carolina. You get A&M losing to Miami, us beating LSU. Alabama getting beat by Texas. I mean, all of a sudden the SEC West looks a little whatever. Florida getting beat by Utah, right? So the losses are stacking up early for the SEC teams who don't look all that strong or impressive. I can't think of an SEC team that's had an impressive performance to this point against a quality opponent. Can you guys? I'm trying to think.
Georgia hasn't played a quality opponent yet.
They haven't played anybody yet. But up to this point, I can't think of one.
And as we've learned, 2 games a season does not make.
No.
But all you can do is make your, this is at a point in time. This is our observations. And
right. This is where we're at.
Next week, maybe we'll have different observations. But
well, one ACC school that is not exactly bringing up the conference is Boston College, that has very much struggled. Lost to Northern Illinois at home, guarantee game. That's a toughie, right? And then almost lost to Holy Cross, which would have looked pretty dreadful for Jeff Hafley. He's got to get things turned around up in Chestnut Hill, and he will welcome Florida State noon on Saturday. We'll kind of dive deeper into Boston College, just maybe what's gone wrong. We'll check in with the BC Rivals site, get some of their perspective on a lot of things up there. I know they've had a lot of inexperience across the board, but they were supposed to be good up front. They're supposed to have some big offensive linemen returning from injury. We kind of expected BC might be a little bit better. So far, not so much at all. But what's to come here as we're talking on a Sunday night on Seminole Sidelines. Monday, we'll have press conferences with all the coaches. We'll get some feedback on these injuries, obviously. Hopefully some clarity there from Mike Norvell. Hopefully some clarity to some of Mark's points about Coach Atkins. What's the philosophy on zone blocking, counter blocking? Is there a why? Is it to better attack a Southern Miss? Are you trying to put something else out there on film for Clemson and BC to really think about? A lot of different factors that could be in play there too. Well, for Pat Burnham, for Mark Salva, Jerry Cutts, I'm Bob Ferranti. We appreciate you watching the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. Again, we'll be here every Sunday night. Osceola YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Against our final couple hours, if you want to jump in on that promo, use FSU 4524. It's the LSU score, very easy to remember. Even the Marching Chiefs did it on the field at halftime. They did the 45-24. Our code is FSU 4524. If you are a new subscriber, 1 year for just $45.24. You can get all of Pat Burnham's analysis, Mark Salva's analysis. We did this second watch Sunday today on the message board. All those thoughts. As you're watching the night game, you might miss something. We're pouring over the film again and trying to put some thoughts there on the board for you. And you can chat with us too there. So we appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you again in the middle of the week. Take care. Hope you had a great weekend.